Rain fell in thin, slanted lines across the parking lot, scattering light like glass shards. The sign above the restaurant flickered. Mike's Pizza. Half the bulbs dead, the others buzzing faintly against the night. A man stood beneath it, his hands tucked into the pockets of a faded jacket. His cap was pulled low, shadowing his face. To anyone watching, he looked like another tired delivery driver on a slow night, mid-30s. Jeans worn thin to the knees, shoes scuffed, posture heavy from long hours. His name, though no one in the restaurant knew it, was Ethan Cole. And this wasn't just another Mike's Pizza. It was his. He'd founded the chain 15 years ago with nothing but a recipe card and a promise to his late father that every store would feel like home for both customer and worker. But lately, rumors had reached him. Complaints, photos, numbers that didn't add up. Something was rotting from the inside. So Ethan did what no consultant or report could ever do. He put on a cap, left his car in a nearby lot, and walked in like a stranger. The bell above the door jingled softly as he entered. Warm air rushed past him, thick with the scent of cheese and fryer oil. He glanced around. Plastic booths lined with red vinyl, napkin dispensers half empty, posters curling at the edges. The place was noisy but hollow, like laughter forced at a bad party. A teenager behind the counter looked up without smiling. "Name?" she asked, fingers clacking against the register. "Ethan," he said. 15 minutes, she muttered, chewing gum, not looking at him again. He stepped aside and waited. To everyone here, he was no one, just another man grabbing dinner after a long shift. And that was exactly what he wanted. The restaurant was bright but tired. Grease shimmered on the tiles. A soda machine hissed in protest with every pour. Someone's phone played music too loudly in the kitchen, mixing with the hum of an old refrigerator. Ethan leaned against the wall, eyes tracing the photos of smiling families hung above the tables. He remembered taking one of those pictures himself years ago, back when each store opening felt like a celebration. Back then, every worker knew his name. Now, he doubted anyone even knew the founder's story. "Derek," a girl yelled from the back. "We're out of pepperoni again." A gruff voice answered, "Then use sausage and don't tell him." Ethan turned his head slightly. The man who emerged from the kitchen was tall, broad-shouldered, and confident in a way that didn't invite kindness. His name tag read Derek Holt, manager. He wiped his hands on his apron and scrolled through his phone as he walked. When he finally noticed Ethan at the counter, he gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Order for Ethan?" he asked. "Yeah, just a regular pepperoni." "Cash or card?" "Cash," Ethan replied. Derek nodded, uninterested. "You can wait over there." Ethan nodded and moved to a seat by the window. He liked to see things from the edges. You could learn more from silence and small talk. Through the glass, the parking lot shimmered with puddles. Inside, the noise never stopped. The shrill timer from the oven, the murmur of teenagers talking too fast, the clatter of trays. The smell of dough and burnt crust mixed with something else. Fatigue. A boy rushed in through the side door, dripping from the rain. He couldn't have been older than 20, wearing a delivery jacket that was 2 sizes too big. His name tag read Tyler. He looked pale, eyes rimmed red. "Derek," he said, panting. Customer on 9th Street said the pizza was cold again. Derek didn't even glance up from his phone. Then tell him to buy a microwave. "Sir, the warmer's broken again," Tyler stammered. I asked last week if we could." "You asked?" Derek snapped, dropping his phone on the counter. "You think this is a charity? You got one job, deliver pizza, not excuses." Tyler froze. His jaw twitched, like he wanted to say more but couldn't afford to. He lowered his gaze instead. "Yes, sir." From the kitchen, a woman's voice cut through, sharp and steady. "Leave him alone. Derek." Everyone turned. It was Martha, the night shift supervisor. Her gray hair was tied in a bun, her hands dusted with flour, her expression soft but tired. Ethan recognized that face instantly, someone who had carried an entire store on her back for years and still apologized for it. "Not now, Martha," Derek said, waving her off. "He needs to toughen up." "They all do. Hey," she replied, crossing her arms. "Maybe if you treated them like people, they'd want to stay. Ethan watched the exchange quietly, heart heavy. The scene played out exactly as he'd feared. A manager more interested in control than care, staff breaking under pressure, a good woman trying to hold it all together. He rose from his seat and walked back to the counter. "Excuse me," he said. "Could you make that pizza well done?" Derek didn't look up. "If you got cash, you can wait like everyone else." Ethan's lips curled faintly. "Of course." He stepped back again, this time near the oven, pretending to watch but really listening. The girl at the register, her tag said Alyssa, was new. Her hands shook when she placed orders. Every few minutes, she glanced toward Derek as if checking whether she was safe. Then it happened. A metal tray slipped from her fingers and crashed onto the floor. Breadsticks were scattered across the tiles. The entire restaurant froze. Derek spun around. "Are you kidding me? That's inventory. You think food grows on trees." "I'm sorry," Alyssa whispered, eyes filling fast. Ethan's fingers twitched at his side. He wanted to step in, to stop it, but before he could move, Martha stepped forward. "That's enough," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Derek scoffed. "You gonna lecture me again, Grandma?" Martha's jaw tightened. "I've worked here for 15 years. This isn't leadership. It's bullying." For a long second, no one breathed. Even the fryer fell quiet, as though the room itself held its breath. Ethan stuttered them all, Alyssa's tears, Tyler's clenched fists, Martha's courage, Derek's neigh. His stomach twisted. This was his company. His. And it had forgotten what kindness looked like. He reached for his wallet, paid in cash, and waited for the box to slide across the counter. Tyler brushed past him, carrying a delivery bag, whispering an apology for bumping into him. "No harm done," Ethan said softly. "You're working hard tonight." Tyler looked up, surprised. "Yeah, trying to make rent." Ethan nodded. "You'll make it." For a second, the young man smiled, small but real. Then Derek barked his name, and the moment was gone. Tyler disappeared into the rain, swallowed by headlights. Ethan glanced down at the pizza box in his hands. The familiar logo, his father's handwriting turned into a corporate emblem, stared back at him. He felt the weight of what had been lost. He looked up, straight at Derek, and said quietly, "Tell your manager that the owner just got his order." Martha froze. Derek blinked, and in the sudden silence, even the oven seemed to stop humming. For a moment, no one spoke. The rain tapped against the windows in slow, uneven rhythms. The soda machine hissed in the background. Martha's eyes widened as she stared at the man in the cap. "Yo, wait! What did you just say?" she whispered. Ethan set the pizza box gently on the counter, the logo facing upward. His voice stayed calm, almost quiet enough to miss. "I said the owner just got his order." Derek blinked. "Owner?" He laughed, sharp, mocking, a laugh too loud for the small room. "You? The owner? Of Mike's Pizza?" He let his eyes travel over Ethan's faded jeans, the old cap, the scuffed sneakers. "Yeah, sure. And I'm the mayor." Ethan didn't react. His stillness unsettled everyone. "Look, buddy," Derek continued, "I don't know what kind of stunt you're trying to pull, but this ain't funny. You want to complain about your pizza, you can take it up with customer service." Martha's voice trembled. "Derek, I think he's telling the truth." Derek frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" She stepped closer to Ethan, eyes searching his face. She'd seen that expression before, once, years ago, in an old company photo framed in the break room before corporate replaced it with a marketing poster. "Your name," she said softly. "Ethan Cole." Ethan nodded once. The name hung in the air like a spell. Alyssa, the young cashier, gasped. "Wait, the Ethan Cole? Like, the guy who started the whole company?" Ethan smiled faintly. "That's right." The words hit like thunder. Even the fryer seemed to pause mid-sizzle. Derek's smirk faltered. "No way." He tried to laugh again, but his throat caught. The CEO doesn't just walk into some random store in the middle of nowhere. Ethan finally spoke, his tone as steady as rain. "I didn't walk into a random store, Derek. I walked into my father's dream." and I wanted to see what it had become. The words sank deep. Derek shifted uncomfortably, his voice cracking between arrogance and fear. Look, man, if you really are who you say you are, fine. Great. But we've had a rough night, okay? Short staff, deliveries late. Then maybe that's a problem, Ethan said quietly. Every night's a rough night when no one cares how people are treated. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried something that no threat could. Truth. Martha stepped back, as though suddenly realizing how much she'd been holding in. It's been bad for a while, Mr. Cole, she said, her voice low. I didn't know who to tell. We were told corporate stopped visiting, that they didn't care anymore. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's not true. Her eyes filled. Then someone lied to us. Across the counter, Alyssa stood frozen. The name tag on her chest trembled with her heartbeat. She looked barely 18, her voice barely a whisper. It is mean to everyone, she said. Mr. Holt, he cuts hours if we say we're sick. He said I'd lose shifts if I dropped another tray. Ethan looked at Derek. Is that true? Derek's expression hardened. They're kids. They need to learn responsibility. I run this place the way it needs to be run. By fear. Ethan asked. By results. Ethan took a step forward, close enough that Derek had to look at him. His tone stayed calm, but there was no softness now. You think results mean profits. I think results mean people leaving here with their dignity intact. No one dared to breathe. Then the door burst open. The bell above it jingled violently as Tyler stumbled in, dripping wet, rain plastering his hair to his forehead. He was shaking, clutching his empty delivery bag. Mr. Holt, he gasped, voice breaking. The guy on Oak Street. He said the pizza had mold. I didn't believe him, but I saw it too. Mold? Martha repeated. Derek paled. What the hell are you talking about? Tyler hesitated, eyes darting between them. The dough, it smelled bad. I told you last week it had expired. That dough's fine. Derek barked. Don't start spreading. It's not fine. Tyler snapped, surprising everyone. His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. I saw the date on the bag. You said to use it anyway. The room went silent. Martha's face turned ashen. Derek, please tell me you didn't. Derek threw up his hands. What was I supposed to do? The shipment didn't come in. Corporate cut our budget again. Ethan's voice cut through, low and measured. Corporate didn't cut anything. Derek froze. Ethan turned to Martha. Would you check the walk-in cooler? She hesitated, then nodded and disappeared into the back. No one moved until she returned a minute later, holding a torn plastic bag with faded ink that read, Best Buy, September 8th. It was now October. Martha's voice shook. He's been using this. Ethan took the bag from her hands. It was damp, cold, and smelling faintly of yeast and rot. He stared at the date, then at Derek. You serve this to families, he said quietly. To kids. Derek looked cornered now, sweating under the fluorescent light. You don't get it. I had to make it work. We've got no support. Half my staff quits every week. What was I supposed to do? Throw it away? Ethan's voice didn't rise. If anything, it dropped lower, steadier, more dangerous. You were supposed to lead, not exploit. For the first time that night, Derek had no reply. Ethan set the bag down on the counter and looked around. Alyssa's eyes shimmered. Tyler's jaw trembled. Martha just stared at the floor, too tired to cry. Finally, Ethan turned back to the young driver. Tyler, he said gently, did you tell the customer the truth? Tyler hesitated. No, sir. I said it must have been the oven. Derek told me to say that. Said if I told the truth, I'd lose my job. A long silence followed. Ethan's gaze softened. And yet you're telling it now. Tyler nodded, voice small. Yeah, I couldn't keep lying. Good, Ethan said quietly. That's courage. Something shifted in the room, small but real. Ethan straightened his shoulders. He looked at Derek, then at Martha, then at every frightened face in the room. I built this company on honesty, he said. My father used to tell me, You can fix bad dough, but you can't fix bad character. Tonight, I saw both. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a phone. His thumb hovered over a message. One word blinked on the screen. Activate. He looked up at Derek. You called it corporate policy, he said softly. Let's see what corporate policy really looks like. He pressed send. Outside, through the rain, engines roared to life. Headlights cut through the fog. Dark SUVs rolled into the parking lot, unmarked but deliberate. Alyssa gasped. Martha's hand flew to her mouth. Derek took a step back, eyes wide. What's happening? Ethan picked up the molder bag and set it in front of him like evidence. Accountability, he said simply, and as the doors swung open and the storm poured in, Derek realized too late. This wasn't just a customer complaint. This was judgment. The front doors burst open, wind and rain sweeping across the tile floor. Flashlight sliced through the gloom as three figures in dark suits stepped inside, their coats slick with water, their expressions stone cold. Behind them followed a woman with a clipboard and a badge reading Health Department. Martha flinched as a storm carried in the sound of tires screeching against wet asphalt. Derek's face drained of color. What is this? He stammered. Ethan turned to face him, unflinching. This, he said quietly, is the truth arriving on time. The front man, tall, broad-shouldered, eyes sharp as glass, nodded once to Ethan. Mr. Cole, he said, we receive your alert. Ethan gave a single nod. Start with a walk-in cooler, then the prep stations. Yes, so. The team moved fast, unzipping bags, taking photographs, collecting samples, every motion rehearsed and efficient. It was a corporate investigation in full swing, and Derek Holt suddenly realized he was standing in the middle of a storm far bigger than the one outside. Wait! He shouted, trying to block their path. You can't just barge in here. This is private property. The woman with the badge looked up calmly. Health and safety inspection. We can and we will. Ethan's voice was quiet but steady. You'll cooperate, Derek. Derek turned on him, his face twisted with panic and fury. You set me up. You wanted to humiliate me. Ethan's eyes hardened. You humiliated yourself when you forgot that people's lives come before profit. The air crackled with tension. Behind the counter, Alyssa huddled near the soda machine, whispering to Tyler, Is he really the CEO? Tyler nodded, his voice hushed. Yeah, and I think Derek's finished. Alyssa glanced toward Martha, who stood near Ethan, her hands clasped nervously. Do you think he'll fire all of us too? Martha shook her head slowly. No, sweetheart, I don't think that's why he's here. Across the room, one of the investigators called out, Mr. Cole, you might want to see this. Ethan stepped forward. In the back kitchen, under the flickering fluorescent light, a bucket sat half-filled with cloudy water and pieces of dough floating in it. The smell hit hard, sour, heavy, unmistakable. The investigator held up a clipboard. Temperature logs falsified. Same handwriting, same initials. For the last 3 months. Ethan's jaw tightened. Whose initials? The investigator looked down. D.H. Everyone's eyes turned to Derek. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. It's not what it looks like. I just forgot to replace the logs. We've been understaffed. You have no idea how hard it's been. Ethan stepped closer, his voice low but cutting. You're right. I don't know what it's like to make excuses for endangering customers. Derek's lip trembled. You think you're better than me because you wear a suit. Ethan's expression softened, but not in sympathy. I used to wear that same apron, he said. I burned my hands pulling dough from ovens that barely worked. My father mopped these floors himself. The difference between us, Derek, is that we never stopped caring who we were feeding. The words landed like a verdict. Silence hung in the air, broken only by the faint hum of the freezer. Then Martha spoke, her voice trembling but clear. He's been yelling at us for months. Every time we mentioned safety, he said, corporate doesn't care. We just stopped trying. Alyssa nodded, tears in her eyes. He made me clean ovens with bleach and no gloves. Tyler's voice joined hers, shaking. He told me to lie about expired toppings. I needed the job, but... Ethan raised a hand gently. It's okay. You're safe now. The health inspector cleared her throat. Mr. Cole, we'll need to shut this location down temporarily. Ethan nodded without hesitation. Do it. Derek spun toward him. You can't. That'll ruin me. Ethan met his eyes. You ruined yourself when you stopped being honest. For a long moment, Derek stood frozen, his breath ragged. Then, suddenly, his anger flared again. You don't get it. Cole, you abandoned us. We got budget cuts, broken equipment, and no help. You sit in your glass office while we... Ethan's voice snapped like thunder. That's enough. The room went still. Even the rain outside seemed quiet. Ethan's tone shifted, not cruel, but resolute. You think leadership means barking orders and blaming others. It doesn't. Leadership means taking care of people even when nobody's watching. That's what you forgot. He took a step closer, lowering his voice so only Derek could hear. And that's why you're done. Derek swallowed hard, eyes darting around as if looking for an exit that wasn't there. The strength drained from his posture, leaving only defeat. Ethan turned to Martha. You've been here the longest, haven't you? She nodded slowly. 22 years. He smiled faintly. Then you're in charge while we rebuild this place. Effective immediately. Her mouth fell open. Sir, You've earned it, Ethan said simply. I want this place to be what it was meant to be, not just profitable, but human. Martha blinked back tears. Thank you, Mr. Cole. I'll make sure of it. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. I know you will. He turned to Alyssa and Tyler. You two, go home for tonight. You'll still have your jobs when this reopens. But next time, if you see something wrong. Alyssa straightened. We'll speak up, sir. Tyler nodded. Even if it costs us. Ethan smiled faintly. That's how integrity starts. Outside, lightning flashed, and in its glow, Derek stood alone near the counter, the realization finally sinking in. Everything he'd built on fear was collapsing before his eyes. He looked up, voice breaking. What happens to me now? Ethan looked at him quietly. You'll answer to the board, and the health department, and maybe, in time, to yourself. For the first time that night, Derek said nothing. The investigators packed up their evidence. The inspector filed her report, and slowly the noise faded into a strange calm. Ethan lingered a moment longer, staring at the old logo on the wall, his father's name carved into it, faded but still there. He reached up, brushed a hand over the dust, and whispered, We're going to fix this, Dad. Then he turned to Martha. Lock up after they are done. I'll be back tomorrow morning. As he stepped into the storm, the rain washed over him, soaking through his coat. But this time, it didn't feel cold. It felt cleansing. The next morning, the world was quiet again. Sunlight spilled across the parking lot, glinting off the closed for inspection sign taped to the glass door. The storm had passed, outside and inside. Ethan Cole stepped out of a black sedan, not in disguise this time. No baseball cap, no polo. He wore a crisp navy suit, the kind that carried weight without needing to shout. His eyes, though, were tired, kind, reflective. The employees who'd returned for the morning meeting stayed in stunned silence. Alyssa clutched a notepad. Tyler stood frozen near the counter, his apron folded neatly in his hands. And Martha, standing by the coffee maker that now looked almost sacred, whispered under her breath, He really was a CEO. Ethan gave her a small, humble smile. And still am. But titles don't mean much if you forget where you came from. He turned toward the front door as two black SUVs pulled in. Out stepped a team of officials and corporate representatives, men and women in dark suits, carrying folders stamped with the logo Cole Foods Group. They entered quietly, eyes scanning the room. There was no arrogance in their steps, only purpose. Ethan faced his staff. Before anyone says a word, you all deserve to know the truth. He walked to the middle of the dining area and set down a folder. Inside were photos, peeling walls, moldy cheese, falsified safety logs. The truth lay bare. These came from last night's inspection. he said, voice low but steady. What we found was unacceptable. Not just to me, to every customer who ever trusted us. He glanced at Martha. To every worker who gave years of their life to keep this place running. Silence. Then he continued. I started this chain with my father in 2005. We made pizzas in a one-room kitchen that barely had working lights. We believed every meal should be made with pride, because food isn't just food. It's dignity. His hand hovered over the faded logo on the counter. But somewhere along the way, we lost that. We let profit speak louder than people. He turned to the employees. Last night, I came here in disguise to see the truth for myself. What I found wasn't just broken ovens, it was broken trust. Derek, now standing near the corner, his uniform crumpled and his eyes hollow, swallowed hard. I never meant for it to go that far. Ethan looked at him, calm, firm, but not cruel. Intentions don't clean kitchens, Derek. Actions do. The HR director, a tall woman with glasses, stepped forward. Mr. Holt, you're suspended pending full investigation. You will have the right to respond, but not to return. Derek nodded weakly, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Ethan turned to the others. For everyone else, no one's losing their job today. But this restaurant will close for 2 weeks while we rebuild it from the ground up. And when it reopens, he paused, scanning their faces. It will do so under new leadership, new ethics, and new purpose. He motioned to Martha. Martha Jennings has been promoted to general manager, effective immediately. Gasps rippled through the room. Martha's eyes widened. Sir, I don't know what to say. Ethan smiled softly. Say you'll lead with kindness. That's all I ever needed to hear. Her lips trembled as she nodded. I will. I promise. Ethan turned back to crowd, his voice gaining quiet strength. This chain was never meant to be just another company. It was meant to be a family, the kind that looks out for each other. And if we've forgotten that, then it's time we remember. He looked toward the windows, sunlight now streaming across the floor. I want this place to stand for decency again, because when decency dies, everything else does too. Alyssa's voice broke through the hush. So, why didn't you tell us who you were? Ethan looked at her, eyes warm but sad. Because sometimes you only see people's truth when they think you're beneath them. The room stayed silent for a long time. No one moved. Then, gently, Ethan reached into his pocket and sent a single text message. One word. Proceed. Within moments, the corporate representatives began unsealing envelopes, posting notices, handing out compensation slips, employee assistance details, and rehire guarantees. The air filled with a strange, healing energy, order-meeting compassion. For the first time, Alyssa smiled. You're fixing everything. Ethan shook his head. No, we're fixing it, together. As the sun broke through fully, the glass doors reflected their faces, tired, relieved, hopeful. And behind them, the old faded sign that once represented failure now glowed with new promise. 3 days later, the headquarters boardroom was filled with silence thick enough to hear every clock tick. The blinds were drawn. The long mahogany table gleamed under the pale morning light. At the far end sat Ethan Cole, expression composed, posture straight, hands folded. Across from him sat Derek Holt, suit wrinkled, tie crooked, his face a study in regret and defiance. The corporate counsel adjusted her glasses. Mr. Holt, the findings are clear. You falsified food safety logs, violated labor policy, and retaliated against staff who reported hazards. Derek swallowed, his voice trembling. You don't understand. I was drowning. Orders kept coming in. Supplies were late. I was trying to survive. Ethan's voice was calm. You were trying to survive by stepping on the people beneath you. He leaned forward, his tone steady. And I can't build a company on that. The HR director handed Derek an envelope. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately. You will receive documentation regarding legal review. Derek stared down at the paper. His fingers shook. For the first time, he didn't argue. He just nodded, small, defeated. As he stood to leave, he paused at the door. For what it's worth, he muttered. You were right. I stopped caring. Ethan's gaze softened. Then start again, wherever life takes you next. Derek didn't look back. When the door closed, the room exhaled. That afternoon, Ethan drove to the restaurant site. The windows were covered in brown paper now, construction tape crisscrossed over the glass. Inside, the sound of drills, brushes, and fresh paint replaced the echo of old arguments. The old sign was gone. In its place, a new one waited to be hung. Cole's Pizza, Fresh Start Program. Martha stood by the counter, clipboard in hand, giving directions to a small team. She turned when she saw him. You're just in time, she said, smiling. We're ahead of schedule. Ethan grinned faintly. Haven't heard that phrase in years. She laughed, the kind of laugh that comes after months of tension finally breaking. Tyler and Alyssa were working side by side, unpacking new uniforms. The air smelled of fresh dough, lemon cleaner, and something that hadn't existed here in a long time, pride. Ethan stepped closer, watching them. How's the training going? Different, Alyssa said, smiling shyly. In a good way. We got safety meetings now, and they actually listen when we talk. Tyler nodded. Feels like a real team. Ethan looked around. The fresh paint, the repaired ovens, the new safety charts on the wall. That's what it's supposed to be. Martha approached him quietly. Sir, there's something you should see. She led him to a wall where workers were hanging framed photographs, black and white snapshot from the early days. Ethan and his late father standing behind a small oven, flour on their hands, smiles real and unguarded. Beneath the frame was a plaque that read, Food with heart, service with honor. Ethan's throat tightened. For a long moment, he just stared. Martha spoke softly. We thought it was time to remember where this all began. He nodded, voice rough. You made the right call. Outside, the sky was bright and open. Customers had already begun peeking through the windows, curious about the new Cole's Pizza. Ethan turned to his new manager. When we reopen, make sure we feed every customer like they're family, especially the ones who look like they can't afford to be. Martha smiled knowingly, just like you did. He smiled back. Exactly. A week later, local news stations covered the reopening. Corporate scandal becomes catalyst for change. The headline read, Ethan didn't give interviews. He didn't need to. The story spoke for itself, of accountability, redemption, and rebuilding from the inside out. Every location in the chain began mandatory staff training called the Human Standard. It focused not on sales metrics, but on empathy, safety, and respect. Health inspectors returned and passed every site. Customers noticed. Reviews changed. Feels like a family place again. Everyone smiles. Food tastes cleaner, better. It wasn't just a restaurant reborn. It was a culture redefined. Late one evening, Ethan sat alone in his office. Outside, the city lights blinked like restless stars. He opened an old notebook from his father's days, grease-stained pages, handwritten recipes, notes like treat your staff like customers. They feed your dream. Ethan smiled faintly, tracing the ink with his finger. A knock came at the door. It was Martha. We just closed for the night, she said softly. First day went smoothly. Thought you'd want to know. Ethan nodded, eyes distant but peaceful. Thank you, Martha, for staying when things fell apart. She smiled. It's easier to stay when someone finally listens. He looked up at her, truly looked. Then maybe listening is where leadership starts. That night, as Ethan left the restaurant, he paused beneath the new sign glowing gently in the dark. Cole's Pizza, every slice made with honor. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a CEO trying to fix something broken. He felt like a man returning home. The first morning of reopening felt like spring breaking through winter. Sunlight spilled across the polished counter. The new sign out front, Cole's Pizza, Fresh Start Program, gleamed in the early light, catching the eyes of passing cars. Inside, the air was alive with something rare. Hope. Martha wiped down the last table, humming softly to herself. Tyler was stacking boxes near the oven, his uniform crisp and clean this time. Alyssa handed out menus, greeting the first curious customers who stepped through the door. No one barked orders. No one walked on eggshells. There was laughter, small but sincere, the sound of people learning how to breathe again. Ethan stood quietly by the window, cap pulled low, just watching. He didn't need to announce himself anymore. He belonged to this place again, not as a figure of authority, but as its caretaker. By noon, the restaurant was full. A mother sat with her 2 kids, folding napkins into clumsy paper boats. An older couple shared a single slice and talked about how it used to taste when we were young. And at a corner table, a man in a work uniform looked around nervously before asking, "Hey, do you still have that pay-it-forward deal?" Martha smiled. "Even better," she said, sliding a plate across the counter. "This one's already covered." He blinked. "By who?" She tilted her head toward the kitchen, where Ethan was quietly helping Tyler carry dough trays. The man smiled, a soft disbelief in his eyes. Guess some people still remember how to be kind. At 3 o'clock, the staff gathered in the back for a break, something Derek never allowed before. They sat around a long table, eating the new signature pizza Ethan had designed himself. Simple ingredients, clean flavors. Name the promised slice. "Why the name?" Tyler asked between bites. Ethan leaned back, thoughtful, because every place, every person, deserves one. A promise that what they give will be respected, and that someone's got their back. Alyssa looked down, her eyes glistening. Nobody's ever said that to us before. Ethan smiled gently. That's why we're saying it now. The transformation spread beyond that single restaurant. The corporation rolled out new policies, paid breaks, mental health resources, and leadership workshops titled Empathy in Action. Locations that once operated on fear began to rediscover pride. In one branch, a cashier started a donation jar for homeless shelters. In another, a team volunteered to deliver free meals after a local fire. The culture was shifting, from profit-driven to people-driven. And the spark had started with one man who refused to raise his voice, even when everyone else had lost their humanity. One evening, as the dinner rush wound down, Ethan stepped outside. The night was cool, the city lights blinking beyond the parking lot. Martha joined him, arms crossed, smiling tiredly. "You ever think your dad would have imagined this?" Ethan chuckled softly. He used to say a good restaurant feeds more than hunger. It feeds the soul. Took me a while to remember that. She nodded. "You reminded all of us." He looked through the glass window, at Alyssa wiping tables, Tyler flipping dough, customers smiling between bites, and said quietly, "No." We reminded each other. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of life inside the restaurant said everything words couldn't. That week, Ethan called for one more change. A plaque was mounted near the entrance. Simple, bronze, and easy to miss if you weren't looking closely. It read, "To everyone who kept showing up, even when no one saw you, you are the reason this place stands." It wasn't about rebranding anymore. It was about redemption, for a man, for a team, for an entire chain that forgot the meaning of service. The same customers who once complained now lingered after meals. The same staff who once whispered in fear now joked openly. And somewhere between the sound of sizzling crust and quiet laughter, the soul of Cole's Pizza had returned, humble, human, alive. That night, as they closed, Ethan turned off the last light and paused by the door. The smell of flour and basil still clung to his hands. He smiled faintly, a man who had built an empire, lost its heart, and found it again in the simplest of places, a pizzeria that finally remembered people come before profits. He whispered to himself, "Redemption isn't bought, it's owned, one slice at a time." Night, a rooftop above the city. The skyline hummed with quiet electricity, neon signs, distant car horns, the low pulse of a city that never sleeps. Ethan Cole stands alone, the wind tugging lightly at his shirt. Below, one of his restaurants glows like a small lantern, a symbol of something reclaimed. He looks down at the street where it all began, the delivery car, the argument, the humiliation, the truth. Then he speaks, not to anyone in particular, just to the night. You know what they don't tell you about power? It doesn't change who you are. It just amplifies what's already there. He pauses, eyes narrowing at the horizon. When I walked into that store, no one saw a CEO. They saw someone small, disposable, someone they could talk down to. And maybe that's a real problem. Not the pizza, not the money, not even the management. It's that somewhere along the way, we stop seeing people. The city hums beneath him, the wind carrying his words. We traded eye contact for efficiency. We traded patience for profit. And kindness, we made it a luxury. He exhales, the breath visible in the cold air. But that night, when a single driver told me the truth, everything changed. He didn't know who I was. He didn't owe me anything. He just cared. And maybe that's what this world's starving for. Not another policy, not another promotion, but a reminder that decency isn't outdated. He looks down again, sees Martha locking the doors below, laughing with Alyssa and Tyler as they head to their cars. The sight softens him. You can't run a company without compassion. You can't build loyalty with fear. You can't feed people if you forget they're human. His voice drops, almost to a whisper. So if you're watching this, if you're sitting behind a desk or standing behind a counter, remember this. Someone's watching how you treat the next person who can't give you anything back. He slips his hands into his pockets, looking toward the first faint glow of dawn. Because the real measure of success isn't how much you earn. It's how much dignity you leave behind. He lets the silence breathe. The city lights flicker like stars returning to their places. Then, a final line, soft, but heavy enough to echo through every heart listening. When you see wrong, do you stay quiet, or do you stand up?